Just want to do a real quick video, hopefully under 5 minutes video on radio communications after shit hits the fan, without rule of law, boogaloo, what have you. So, to me, this is a top priority. You know, there's lots of folks out there that spend thousands of dollars on weapons and ammunition and food and tactical gear, and they put little to no thought on communications. So, you know, I say people out there do that because I was one of those people for a long time. You know, a few years ago, I did buy my first baofeng ham radio, and you know, I bought it, and it stayed in the box, and I thought, okay, I'm good, I'm prepared. Radio communications, good. Well, that's not true. I'm going to get into that here in just a little bit, but first thing first is I want to go over philosophy of use, or POU. So we'll just say as an example, you wake up one day and your cell phone doesn't work. There's plenty of reasons why this could happen, EMP or what have you, but honestly the most likely reason why your cell phone would not work is it actually happened in 2020 and 2021. Basically, there was civil unrest in certain areas of the United States, and the government, whether it was the federal government, state government, or county, just shut the cell phone towers off. So that was just basically break up communications between various nefarious groups, whether it was right-wing groups or left-wing groups. It doesn't matter. We're not going to talk about that. But point is that the government just shut the cell phone towers off. There's places in the various capitals and the capitol buildings and such where they turned off Wi-Fi, so people were unable to communicate that way. So lots of folks will go out and they'll go, well, okay, I'll buy a CB radio and we're done. Okay, communication's good. Next. No. So let's start with the CB. We're going to start first with the Cobra 19 models. Now this is a Road King RKCB. It's based on the real common Cobra 19 radio. And these are alright. They're around $100 or so. At truck stops, of course, you can buy them cheaper on eBay, Amazon, what have you. But this is basically, I would say, your entry level. You can buy your Cobra 9s at Walmart for like $40, and I don't recommend those. They'll work, kinda. You can get 1 or 2 miles of range out of them, but they're just really junky radios, okay? These are real common with, say, truckers and stuff like that, but the most range you're going to get, unless you're spending a lot of money and a lot of time building towers and what have you, is going to be about 5 miles, okay? And the next step up from that, and the one that I would recommend, this is President McKinley model. This has what's called a SSB feature, okay? Now SSB is going to be called, it's single sideband. So, for example, you have 40 channels on a regular Cobra 19 model, or your standard CB, like this. You have 40 channels. Well, single sideband is you can split each channel in half. So therefore, you can take all that power that you were sending out for, say, channel 9, you can go to the lower sideband of that, take all that power, and shoot it. So, say for example, if you have a water hose, if you don't have a nozzle on it, you just, you know, turn your spigot on, you're going to have water coming out, we'll just say 10 feet. Well, now you can take a nozzle, which is your single sideband, and you can screw it on the end of that hose, and now it's shooting 30 or 40 feet. That's going to be basically what a single sideband is for. So instead of talking 5 miles with, you know, say, I think this McKinley cost me about $160, $170 on Amazon. So speaking 5 miles, now you're talking 10 or 15 miles. You're going to sound kind of goofy. You're going to kind of sound like a drunk robot, but you can still get those radio communications out. SWR and tuning. CBs have to be tuned, okay? You cannot just buy a magnetic mount CB antenna and throw it up in a freaking tree 20 feet up in the air and call it good. Oh, okay, now we can talk 20, 30 miles. It's not how it works, okay? You have to have what's called a ground plane with CBs, all right? I'm trying to avoid the technicals and all the numbers and all that stuff, just because that freaks out a lot of people, and you know, you'll click to a different video because you don't understand anymore. But basically, your ground plane needs to be at least as wide as the antenna is tall, more or less. So say you have a magnetic mount CB antenna, you can't just stick it on top of your house and call it good. Okay, you have to have the best number is about 109 inches of metal. So you can take honestly a piece of steel conduit, okay, and you can attach your 40-inch fire stick or something to that piece of conduit and zip tie it to the side of your house with you know, whatever you're going to do there, and that is going to get you a lot more clear, and it's not going to be as detrimental to your radio. So if you don't have a ground plane, A, you're not going to sound very good over the airwaves. People may not be able to understand you at all because you're just going to get static out. And B, that can actually do damage to your radio. That can fry your radio operating without a ground plane. So there's all kinds of YouTube videos about, you know, how to cheat and make ground planes. If you're not going to use it on your vehicle, you know, there's people that will use a pie tin on, you know, a piece of tin foil that's 8 foot long, okay, and they'll put that up in the attic of their house or whatever to establish a ground plane, and that works. So that's what I'm basically going to talk about with CBs. So next thing I want to talk about is handheld ham radios. So entry level, what a lot of folks will do is they'll buy a baofeng. Now mine's kind of tricked out. I've got a bunch of extra stuff on here. Larger battery, I've got this exoskeleton to protect the buttons, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to tell you all right now, if you are not a licensed ham radio operator, if you try to talk on this, you are breaking federal law. Now, is it a jailable offense? No. Are they going to come and take your stuff if they find out that you're talking a whole bunch on it? Yes. If you're a nuisance. Licensed ham radio operators, especially the older ones, they're, you know, affectionately referred to as Elmers, they will what's called fox hunt you, and they'll figure out where you are using context clues or with Yagi directional antennas and thousands of dollars of equipment. They'll figure out where you are, and a lot of times they will turn you in to the FCC, and the FCC will come take your stuff. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, if you are trying to talk 100 miles over ham radio, I'm going to tell you all right now, the baofeng is not the way to go. It's just not. Okay? Your standard entry-level baofeng, $20, $30. Okay? And that's why they're awesome, is because they're so cheap. But they're really, really weak. They're only 4 watts. Okay? You're only going to get 5 miles out of this. Okay? If you know, all the planets align and, you know, God's on your side and all this other stuff, you might be able to get 10, maybe. But chances are, the best you're going to get is 5. If you're in an urban environment, the very best you're going to get is maybe 1.5 to 2 miles. Okay? And that's honestly fine. Okay? That's fine. Because most people, especially in small towns and whatnot, only live in a 2 to 5 mile range of one another. Okay? So with CBs, the thing is it's a civilian band. There's so many of them out there that if cell phones didn't work, you know, the CB can basically be used as a news channel. You can sit there and listen to all these people talking about what's going on in your area. Whereas ham radio, it's a lot smaller community. Okay, so with these baofengs, they're awesome for if you're just trying to talk within line of sight. You know, especially if you're within a mile and you're trying to talk back and forth, boop, 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 boop. These things are awesome. And whereas a CB only has 40 channels, or if you're using single sideband or single sideband option, you're going to have 3 times that. These have hundreds of channels, okay? And especially because baofengs are made in China and they're not necessarily up to snuff on what the FCC wants, they're often what's referred to as jailbroke ham radios. So you can use frequencies that aren't technically legal for actual licensed ham radio operators to operate on. Okay, and that's a whole nother long rabbit hole. So what I will say is this: if you have a group that you're in of, say, you know, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 people or whatever, I would recommend that several of those guys take the time and energy to adequately research ham radio. And if they want to become ham radio operators, that's fine, that's awesome, outstanding, good for them. But the average person that's in a group does not need to know all the ins and outs of ham radio. It's the same thing with a vehicle. Okay, if you own a vehicle, do you need to know how to do everything? Fix it? No. Do you need to know how to swap out motors, transmissions, what kind of fluid goes into your gearbox, all that other stuff? No, you don't. You need to know how to put the key in, put it in reverse or drive or neutral, take the park and brake off, what have you, which way to turn the steering wheel in order to turn. That's what you need to know to drive a vehicle, right? Well, there's only a few things that you need to know to just operate a baofeng radio. Or if you want to spend a little bit more money, this is my Retevis RT23. This is a built-in repeater in it. That's why I own this. But you can get all kinds of complex and crazy with ham radios. But the basics are this. You have your baofeng. You turn it on.
Frequency mode.
Okay, right now it's on frequency mode. You can also turn it to
channel mode.
Channel mode. That's your little orange button up here. It goes back and forth. You're going to have two lines. To actuate between the two, you hit this little blue button, A or B. Okay, that's actuating between those two channels to talk or listen. Okay, so if you have an unprogrammed baofeng, which most of you that are watching this probably have an unprogrammed one, and that's fine, you probably need to sit there and actually manually enter in the frequencies that you want to talk on. Okay, now you can Google main ham radio channels. And if you are unlicensed, you're going to want to stay off the main ones, okay? But you can sit there and Google, emergency channels and stuff like that for police and EMS and all that other stuff, and you can sit there and listen, all that great stuff. But you can sit there and just, by typing, go to frequency mode and type in whatever channel that you want to talk on, okay? Now, if you want to have a programmed baofeng, you can either program it by hand, which will take hours, or you can have your radio comms guy, who probably already knows a lot of this stuff, download Chirp onto a laptop, and he can sit there and spend hours figuring out what channels that you want to program into a radio, and he'll sit there and type all this stuff in to Chirp, and then he'll do is take a programming cable, which is, all this is available on Amazon.com for dirt cheap. But he'll take the programming cable and he'll plug it in to the radio, and he'll plug it in to the laptop, and he'll download that information to the radio.
Frequency mode.
Okay, say he has his radio, okay, and he has 200 channels that he wants to have downloaded, and you can sit there and actuate on a programmed baofeng. You can sit there and scroll through your various channels, okay, just by the up and down arrows. Super easy. You can have repeaters programmed in there. You can have your little group's small time repeater, and that's a whole nother video that I've published to YouTube. But you can also have the big giant, public repeaters programmed into your radio, and you just sit there and scroll through them on, say, 200. So you have a radio that's already programmed. He can literally plug that into Chirp, and he can clone that radio with all those same exact frequencies. He can unplug that. He can plug in an unprogrammed radio, and within 10 seconds, you have all that information downloaded to your new radio. And you basically cloned your other radio. So if you have bought a baofeng, and it's unprogrammed, it's still sitting in the box, and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to save this for a rainy day, you have a little bit of work to do, okay? It's not as easy as just owning it. You have to be at least a little bit proficient with it. It's the same thing with weapons. You can't just buy a pistol and keep it in a closet and think, okay, I'm good for a rainy day. You have to be somewhat proficient with that weapon. Same thing with a car. You can't just own a car and think, okay, if I have to ever do a 1,000-mile road trip, I'm good, and expect to be able to do that without being a little bit proficient with driving a vehicle. Does that make sense? Okay? So I hope this answered a few of y'all's questions. If you have any further questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments. I'm sorry this video is probably a little bit longer than 5 minutes, but it's just a whole bunch of information, and I could spend honestly hours upon hours discussing and talking about all the lessons that I've learned with baofengs and CBs, and what I know is a drop in a bucket compared to other people that sit there and talk to me about their wealth of knowledge on just these two small little systems. So anyways, thank you all for watching. If you have any again questions, concerns, drop them in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Please share this video with your friends and family. Have a great day.